Ridiculous fondling cardboard.
What is up? Welcome back to Fondling Cardboard. I'm your host, Mike Lakusta, aka the Golf Card Collector. And today we have friend of the show, James Peacock, back in action to carry on the conversation of the 1900 Copes set. Of course, our pre-war vintage golf card correspondent, John Morton, shared all the ins and outs of the 1900 Copes set last episode, and today we are going to talk with somebody who owns one of the best graded copies in existence of this iconic golf card, Artifacts of History. Sorry for all my grand words there, but I'm just trying to set this up as a very important conversation. Now, James, you know what? I'm just going to let James tell the story. We will jump to it in just a second, but I want to address the title of this episode, which is Shedding the Burden: Why James Peacock is Selling His 1900 Cope Set to Renew the Thrill of the Chase. There's a lot going on here. We're going to cover why are high-end cards a burden on you and your family, and how can ridding your collection of an integral component actually spark or rekindle an aspect of collecting that got you there in the first place. So without further ado, let's jump to the conversation. What is up, James? How you doing, man?
Good. How are you doing, Mike? It's always exciting to talk with you.
Yeah, I'm really good. I agree. You're one of my great golf card hobby friends. And I noticed something in the Facebook group that triggered me to reach out to you. You picked up a second copy of a big golf card. Can you share how that transaction came about, what the card is, obviously, and what were the circumstances around picking up a card like that?
Yeah, definitely one of my bigger purchases in a little while. And I picked up my second copy. It's actually my third copy of Tom Morris from 1900 Copes. So for our visual people out there, let me just show it up on the screen. It's a PSA 2. It looks great. I think it looks a little better than a 2, honestly. Maybe the back is what gave it a 2. But overall, it looks solid. I would give it a solid 3 or 4. So picked it up from Scott in our Facebook group. Saw he had listed it at a really fair price. I think he had listed it for like 1200 USD. So I just private messaged him and we went back and forth, haggled a little bit, found something that worked for both of us, and we were able to make a deal. So happy to have my third copy.
Awesome. It's always good when you get a low grade card that you think deserves better. Sometimes I look at that and say, "Oh, that's a shame. Like I really wish it had gotten better." But on the flip side, you can say, "Well, maybe it is deserving of a 2, but it looks a lot better than other 2s." And that's really important for vintage cards. We call it eye appeal. If
Yes.
you've got, a big tear out of the front of the card and it doesn't look good, that card is a lot less desirable than a card that, only has some kind of wrinkle on the back of the card that's hard to notice. Technically, on the grading scales, they deserve the same grade, but one is more desirable than the other. Not something we really face in modern golf carts as
No.
often. Sometimes with like PMGs, you can get pretty rough edges and corners and things like that. And so precious metal gems might be the only relatable thing in the modern golf card world. But that's great. Do you know what it was on the back? Is there damage or something like that?
Yeah, it looks like someone just used a little bit of adhesive, maybe to, attach it to their collection or how they maybe pinned it up on a wall or something, but it's really not bad. I can read all of the writing still. Yeah, it just looks like a little bit of a stain towards the bottom on the back, but all 4 of the corners are sharp. The centering is awesome. No real like damage on the front at all. So I think all in all, for the price I paid in the grade, it's a really solid card.
Awesome. So why did you get a second copy? Actually, a third copy. Do you still own all 3 copies, or have you gotten rid of one?
As of right now, I own all 3. So the 3 that I own is actually own a narrow cut. So that's extremely rare. There's less than 10 graded by PSA ever. So that's one. I have a PSA 6.5. That's part of my base set that's complete. And then I just picked up this number 2. So I do still own all 3 as of right now, but we'll see if that's going to probably change soon.
So you told me that you were planning on getting a low grade set of 1900 copes. You obviously have a set already. A PSA 6.5 on the Tom Morris is a pretty incredible card, by the way, for those listeners. 6.5 in the modern world doesn't sound like a good grade when it comes to a 124-year-old golf card of the grand old master of golf or whatever his title is. That's an incredible card. What why did you pick up a PSA 2? Why are you going for a low grade set when you already have a high grade set? What's going on?
Yeah, so this was actually inspired by our friend of the show, John. On a previous podcast episode, you guys were talking, he kind of brought up this idea of like downgrading. Um, that I thought that was really interesting because when I first picked up the set that I have that's high, it's technically considered high grade set. I bought it completely raw. So I bought it all together in one binder. All the cards were raw. They were from England, and so my anticipation was I just wanted a complete set. It was on eBay at the time. There were very little listings for all the other cards. It would have took me a long time to piece it together one by one. So I just ripped the Band-Aid off and thought it was an awesome opportunity. So I purchased it and got it graded myself, and that's the set I have now. And in theory, I was expecting to own this set for decades. Like I even thought about like this is one of the things I'll leave to my son, all that kind of stuff. But honestly, like the price has fluctuated so much over the last like year or two, and I am expecting my first son in a couple months. It kind of just has changed a lot in terms of the way I'm thinking about this cards, and um, something that I thought I would maybe have to think about decades from now, not right now. So that's kind of what made me think about getting a low grade set. Just the concept of maybe this, I could sell my high grade set. I can put that money towards my family, my son, my future, and then that gives me a new project of building a new set of like grade 1 to 3, something super more affordable. And it will take me a while because no one's selling complete sets really on eBay. I just think I got really lucky at that time. So that's kind of what's changed and why I'm thinking about, or I am going to build a new set.
Well, I already knew about your son and congratulations on that. That's really exciting for you and your
Thank you.
wife, your whole family. Having a child and starting a family is something that can really change not only your collecting and your collection, but also your life at large, make you rethink things. Makes a lot of sense that if you can repurpose that money in a way that will impact your life, maybe having that high grade cope set isn't providing as much value to you. Now, I agree with you. I never really thought about that whole concept of downgrading. John Morton's talked about it a couple times on the podcast and opened my eyes to it as well because there's something to be said about a card that's seen some things. It's lived a life. Uh, there's a fine line. You don't want something where it's ripped in half or it's got a big crinkle right through the player's face, things like that. So it also creates this artistic kind of venture where you can search for low grade copies that are nice, just like the Tom Morris that you just showed off. So you're planning on selling your high grade set. You don't have to talk numbers. This isn't an investment show per se, but if you feel comfortable, uh, how much, what did you pay for the original set? How much are you hoping to get now that it's been graded and some time has gone by? Do you want to walk through any of that?
Yeah, I don't mind because again, you know me, I'm all about sort of just the hobby itself. The numbers are sort of just a byproduct of what's happened. So yeah, when I bought it initially, it was the biggest purchase I had ever made in the hobby, and it still is to this day. So this was back in like 2021. Um, that's when I was really looking to start collecting the set, and at the time there was only again maybe a dozen cards listed on eBay altogether. I will say they were very affordable. They were all like under $100, and I thought right there that was a steal. Like I thought, the cards are over 100 years old. They're graded. The fact that any of these cards were like under $100 just blew my mind. So I did buy a couple, but at the time I was watching this listing. It was a listing again. It was complete set. It was a list, a seller in England. And my biggest fear before I get into the prices was I had never handled these cards in person. So my biggest fear was the fact that they were even real or not. So that was the biggest risk that I took was like I was just hoping that this guy was legitimate. I did go on his seller page and he did sell some other sets and like he did seem like he was really into like stamps and cards from like really old vintage stuff. So it seemed like it was real, but I didn't have that expert eye. I'd never even like handled a card that wasn't graded in my hand. So that was a big risk. At the time, it was listed for about 8,000 US dollars. I think after a few messages back and forth, I got them down to seven. Um, so I think it was like 6.8, and then I had to pay like $800 or so in like import fees. And then to grade the set, it was probably another, I don't know off the top of my head, but 20 bucks times 10, it was probably a good, I don't know, $500 or so to grade it, maybe a little bit more, because there's 50 cards. So all in, I think if I had to go back and do the math, I would probably say I'm all in around 9,000 at the most, like including shipping, and I had to do, to PSA and all that. So yeah,
Hmm.
I would say that's what I spent all in. So at the time for me, like that's a lot, and it still is a lot of money.
Yeah, that is a lot of money, and your fear that the cards might be counterfeit or just maybe there's something going on. They're not as nice of condition as they look. When it comes to binder pages, I always worry that maybe cards could stick to. I mean, I guess it's better than sitting in a stack because then they could stick together. Some particular sets are notorious for that, but
Yeah.
you're right. Especially spending that amount of money, lots of things could go wrong. Um, just as a side tangent, I'm gonna hold up a couple cards. I picked up a couple. Well, actually, I don't own these yet.
Oh,
I'm looking at them, but yeah, they're the what is
beauty.
that? 19. I don't even remember the year. Uh,
71. I don't know.
70. Yeah, it's the Jack Nicklaus tobacco card, which was XRC, so pre the 1981 Donruss rookie card. And it says gold flake on the back, famous sportsman. So there's a Gary Player and a Jack Nicklaus that um I'm still working out a deal with somebody. He let me hold on to them as I'm gonna do a bit of research. But just like you, I'd never hold one of these in my hand, and as I held it raw, it seemed very flimsy. It was like I'm like, there's no way this card, could be worth $100 or mid to high three-figure dollars. And it's like it looks like in decent condition, but is there something not obvious that I'm not aware of on the card, or is it even real? So I pulled out a loop, a little magnifier sort of thing that professional jewelers use, card graders use. And, I looked into the little dots on the card and how it was printed. And I have another graded copy of one of these cards that I know is authentic. And the printing pattern looks pretty much the same. So,
That's
I,
awesome.
but even having the card in my hand, not even just like you looking at an online listing from halfway across the world, it's literally here on my card desk. And I still have those fears of, is it real? Um, so you put, about $9,000 all in terms of purchasing, fees, shipping, grading, everything to own this high grade set. What are you hoping to get for? Because back in 2021, when you picked up this set, that was kind of the height of the sports card bubble, as we say in modern terms. Cards were super high priced. And a lot of my collection, a lot of people might agree, has gone down since then quite drastically. Some cards very significantly, like we're talking 90, 95%. Some cards are a lot slower, maybe 20%, 10, even 10%. Some cards are this worth the same. There's exceptional circumstances, rare cards, cards that have gone up for whatever reason.
Yep.
Um, I think this set might be one of those that's gone up, and I don't know exactly why. So how much are you hoping to get for it, and why do you think this set has gone up in value?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I was willing to pull the trigger and buy it, because I just thought it was criminally undervalued at that time. I didn't have $9,000 to be throwing around on this kind of stuff, but my gut, I couldn't get it out of my brain. I watched it for weeks and weeks and weeks, and every single time I looked at it, I almost bought it because I was shocked that no one else had. So it was just one of those feelings where there's a YouTuber I really respect called SM Pratt, and he's in the Pokemon community. He has a phrase: minter, rarer, older, better, something like that. I butchered that. Anyway, I think the point of that is that it was the first ever set. The fact that I couldn't find any comps for years of even the Morris card selling, and it all came together. It all looked in beautiful condition. It just seemed like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I couldn't wrap my head around why no one else was pulling the trigger. So that was why I think it went up, was just because I think it was criminally undervalued. So now it's just now catching up to its potential. I still think as of right now they're undervalued, honestly. And I'm not just saying that because I'm getting rid of it. It's hard for me. When I bought it that day, I said this should be worth at least $600,000, and that was before I even got it graded.
What
That's
what
how that's just my gut told me that.
Why did your gut have that feeling? Was it just the age of the cards? Because there are old cards. There's cards that are 100 years old that are worth $5, $10,
Yeah,
$100.
it was ever since I got into the hobby, since like 2019, I felt like the almost most of the golf world was in that same boat, and I still do. I don't have like a scientific reason. I think just the history, the length of the sport, and just the fact that there's such a huge gap between like baseball and golf. I don't understand it. I get that there's a lot less people maybe into it. They don't get to play it as much. But I thought that gap was just way too big. So when I got into golf and the fact that, oh, I can go buy booster boxes and I started ripping a bunch of stuff and having fun for so cheap, I thought like everything was undervalued. So then I started looking into like, okay, what is the rookie cards of Jack? What are the rookie cards of Tiger? What is the first ever set? Like I gravitate towards the first of things as a collector. I don't know, first edition Pokemon. I loved that whole concept that Wizards of the Coast did. So there's just something that I gravitate towards. Like I bought all of the live golf cards that came out this year from Panini Instant that were the first team sets. There's something about the first that really draws me in. So just that combination of I thought it was undervalued, over 100 years old, the first complete golf set. All of those things just told me in my gut that like these and then I looked at the pop report. There's very few graded in terms of the fact that it's been around so long. So all of those things said like this should be in a museum. Like this shouldn't just be on eBay in some guy's like house. Like that's what made me think like this needs a better home than that.
I got you. Low population. The first, I think it's the first Tom Morris card, as well as the first complete golf set. Okay,
Yep.
so I'm starting to get the picture. Um, and by the way, I talked with John Morton, our vintage pre-war golf card correspondent, who's, an expert in all of this, and he and I dove deeper into the Cope set. But I'm starting to, okay, I'm getting the picture. Now all of that said, why would $9,000 all in not be the value versus, you said maybe 100,000 or somewhere in between. Like,
Sure.
is it comparing it against modern cards? Is it comparing it against baseball? Like where did, because pricing on cards can seem arbitrary. And if somebody who's not in the hobby looks at it and says, yeah, $9,000, that makes sense for the rarest of the rare.
Yeah, that's a good question. It definitely, I think that's why it took me so long to pull the trigger. It was because I didn't have data points to say this is an obvious good decision, right? I think it was a lot of art more than science and a lot of just gut intuition in terms of when is the next time how long is it going to take me to complete this, right? One by one, probably a very long time, especially because there were so few listings at the time that were popping up. So that was like daunting on me. Um, and I think the biggest data point I had was, like I talked about before, just the gap between vintage baseball and golf. I mean, maybe that's coming from an ignorant point of view, because again, I don't really track the prices. I don't really track sort of the ups and downs of the hobby in terms of that. But I just thought, man, like when I first, let's just put it this way, when I first discovered the set and learned about it and saw it on PSA Pop Report and started looking at the checklist and reading who was in it and how old it was, I thought I honestly it was going to be a lifelong goal to even complete it, and I probably would never get there because I thought it was going to be at a reach price wise. So I think I was just setting the bar so high in my head that this is going to cost me 100 grand to do. And then I just see it all in for that price. It seemed like a steal to me, even though there was no data to go off. I think it was just more of a, ooh, this might be my only chance to just rip that band-aid off and get it done and be like, I can kind of, all right, not buy as much over the next like year, but that's like a huge checklist I could be done with. So that's kind of how I looked at it. It wasn't like an obvious win at the time. And I think that's why like it probably sat forever, because if it was so obvious, it would have sold.
Right. The challenge of compiling it yourself would definitely influence that decision. I do think following your gut's important. How, how do you think you can let this thing go? You said earlier in the episode that you were planning on holding this on forever. Maybe it was something you could pass down to your son. I understand
Yep.
that finances might come into play here. Like maybe you can sell it,
Sure.
make a bunch of money, and put together a low grade set, and maybe that's the set that you give to your son.
Exactly.
You said earlier, and I know to be true, that you are all about the cards. This is about opening packs and just enjoying the process, completing sets, filling binders. This is a hobby for you. You by no means are an investor per se. So, as
No.
a self-identified collector that doesn't really make your purchasing decisions based on value of the cards, what's your thought process as you're considering selling this set?
Yeah, my first reaction, honestly, is like it's a little bit disappointing because all the things we just talked about, now I'm going to have to deal with trying to complete the low grade set one at a time, paying shipping, paying fees, looking at listings every week. That is, it's part of the fun, it's part of the hunt. It's going to be very interesting. But my first reaction is like I think I told you when we were chatting privately, it's like a little bit of a burden. And what made me even start thinking of this was like John, like he found a set out in the wild. He got it graded. It came back pretty good, not as high graded as mine, but it was graded pretty strong. I think the average was close to like a five, I believe. I have to, I might be wrong, but and he ended up auctioning it off and it got close to like $50,000. And I was like blown away by that price. And I thought, okay, this is what I thought it should be back in 2021. I'm like, okay, that sounds right. And then just the other day, an 8.5 of Tom Morris Jr., that's the highest graded in the world. Mine was the highest graded until this one popped up. I have an 8, that one's an 8.5. That sold for over 40,000 just for that one card. So when I'm starting seeing those two things and looking at my set, and my set averaged, what is my set graded? I think it's rated a 6.99 with PSA's bonuses. But if you don't look at the bonuses, just the ratings, it's an average of a 6.8. Um, so I honestly believe to the right seller and based on the last couple of comps, it could go for probably 80,000. I'm hoping to get. So like a 10x, 80 or 90,000, a 10x would be great. And I think the fact that I have a kid coming, I'm trying to upgrade my lifestyle in terms of buying a new house over the next couple of years. Those are the two factors. If it wasn't for those two things, I'd be like, let's just let it ride. I want to watch the momentum of the next couple of decades. That'll be fun. But it's just, I think my responsibility as a father is creeping in and saying you can't not cash out. Like you just
Mm.
can't. And I never anticipated owning a set that high graded anyway. So I think if there's other people with more higher net worths, and this is going to mean more to them in terms of like beating out each other on the PSA registry, or they just want to own a piece of history, I think that's awesome. And I've looked at it a ton over the last couple of years, and yeah, I think it's just time. But my first reaction was, ugh, I don't want to. But just I think my mind shifted, yeah, definitely over this last year.
You mentioned, owning a piece of history that perhaps some of these high rollers might want to do, and that really triggered something that I want to ask you about. But before I get to it, I just want to wrap up, this uh, buying and selling this set. So you referred to the fun of the hunt of putting the set together in terms of other projects that you've worked on, and that kind of conflicts with the idea of when you initially bought the set, which was it was already assembled. You could avoid all the hassle of
Yep.
searching. So these two ideas I think are both valid, but they're also at odds with each other. Do you think if you had invested a lot of time and effort into seeking out each of the individual parts of this set and you compiled the set by yourself, even if it ended up costing you the same amount of money, do you think this would be a different thought process when it came to offloading it? Do you think you'd have more of an attachment to it?
Ooh, good question. Maybe. Yeah, I think maybe. I think it might be a little bit harder of a decision. I think if I bought it around the same price point all in and it's worth what it is now, I don't think that would have made me not sell it. But yeah, I do think there would have been a little bit more like memories in history tied up with those transactions and with the milestones of getting certain cards. So yeah, I do think it would have been harder. Yeah. So I do think it was just a little bit easier the fact that I got it all in one and I was lucky enough to grade them all myself and it's all sequential numbers and all that. So I think it did kind of bring in a whole different experience though. It was cool. My first like vintage experience. It was taking a huge risk. Like grading them all at once was fun waiting to get the grade back. So that did have its own fun. But yeah, I did think it would have been a little harder to sell if I built it one at a time for sure.
When I reflect on some of my own recent journeys, I think of my Steve Nash purchase. There's a very established Steve Nash collector who was offloading some of his collection. I basically sent him a list. Hey, these are the top 10, 15, 20 cards that I have not only been on the lookout for, but a couple of them I had never even seen before, not even pictures of them on eBay or anywhere else. And he happened to have everything. So I made a large purchase to buy them all. When they showed up, it was a mix of emotions. It was like, it was cutting out that thrill of the chase from the adventure. It was like one foul swoop. And so there's this kind of balance of being grateful. I could find it all. I could capture it all at once. But then, well, what do I do with it now? I'm not chasing, I'm not hunting on eBay. Do I display them? Do I just enjoy them? Do I look at them every day? So I can I think that's worth reflecting on a bit more, and maybe we can talk about that. But
No,
so
I
the
think that's a really good call out that I didn't really think about. But I will say I do think part of that decision was the burden of how hard it was going to be. So I think if like maybe like some of my other goals were like, all right, there's a lot more options on eBay. It's just more of a time thing and more of looking out for deals and all that. But at the time, there was so little even popping up and going down. I didn't even know if it was going to be possible. Like I don't know how many decades it was going to take me. Um, and again, I was new to the hobby. I was only 3 or 4 years in, so I didn't know how many like sets came up on the big auction houses. But over that few years I was watching, like I didn't see any comps or anything. So I think that was another reason why I was just the scarcity mentality of like, all right, this might be a once in a lifetime opportunity versus, okay, I know I can accomplish it over the next couple of years. So I think that fear of like I might not ever be able to finish it also made me more go all in and buying it at once.
Interesting. You brought up the idea of not finding comps. And when it comes to like the first thing that I think of is brand new sets. Cards that don't have comps and then they get sold and then comps start to be set. And the risk there, though, is that the product is hot, it's being talked about, people are excited about it, and naturally prices dwindle over time. What's interesting about this story is that you were looking at this very high-end, important historical set that didn't have recent comps. And so you can take advantage of that, maybe get in before there are comps and before the bar gets set, and you don't have that
Hmm.
risk of something being, hyped up and it could potentially deflate after your purchase. So
Yeah,
all of
it's a
this
good
is
point.
very interesting. Now, the next way I wanted to turn this is that the conversation I had with John Morton recently on the podcast was about curating historical sets. It's just a short period of time in the life of those cards instead of being the sole final owner of that set. Now, your son might not like golf, might not like cards, might not like any of this silly hobby that we participate in. In fact, I mean, we might get lucky and our kids are interested. I know my son recently told me he wanted a shiny Tiger Woods card where he's wearing red. And I'm like, holy smokes, kid,
Nice.
you are following in your father's footsteps. But that's not always the case. Uh, and so your vision was to own this and have that be part of your family legacy. John kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there's this allure to significant cards and sets, and that you can own it and that piece of history for just a short part, almost like that card has its own life. And you don't have to be attached to it on a personal level. It can leave your collection, and wherever it heads, hopefully to a passionate collector, that will just be the next stop. And after them, it will be on another step. And hopefully these cards last decades, if not hundreds of years, and they'll have many owners throughout their journey. Now, although that kind of opened my eyes to it, I still have a hard time getting past collecting for my own personal nostalgia. Maybe that's a selfish instinct that I have. It might be a sign that I haven't accepted my own mortality. So, what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way of looking at it because obviously we're never going to be the last owner of any of this stuff, no matter how long we keep it, right? So unless the next person just burns it, like who knows how many hands this has passed, this Copes card or in the last 100 years, right? So just because I bought that complete graded set and graded it and now I own it, I could have been the 20th owner already. Who knows? Like I have no clue. So I think that's cool in itself. And I do think that is important to not just hoard a bunch of cards from the hobby and you have a basement full of history that no one else gets to see. I think that's a little selfish, um, if anything. So yeah, I'm all about that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But I'm with you in terms of the nostalgia. I was thinking about this a lot yesterday, um, and the most passion, the most pleasure I get out of the hobby is nostalgia in terms of opening packs, filling binders. That's what got me into the hobby, into Pokemon. I wasn't looking at prices. I wasn't looking at Beckett. There was no eBay. I just wanted to complete sets, trade, and be done. And look, there's a hole in my binder right there for a card that's missing. I need to get it. I want to finish it. And just the completionist achievement of completing sets. And that's what got me into the goal of golf. I wanted one complete base set of every set that exists in golf. It doesn't have to be inserts. It doesn't have to be autos. I just want a complete binder of every set. And that's what made me want to buy Copes because I thought that was going to be the hardest one to do. So I did it, but that's the nostalgia for me. So like when this next set comes out in the future, like that gives me almost more excited, and like building out this binder and having my own binder, like it could be worth $20 because all the cards are worth 10 cents. But to me, that binder is worth so much more than like the other Tiger Woods cards that I have that are worth like $1,000. So I think the nostalgia is what keeps me into the hobby and keeps me the most passionate. Whereas the stuff like Copes was just a byproduct of getting lucky and all of that. So like I'm a both. Like I definitely want to sell my vintage stuff, and I want to over time have cards have multiple owners. But like definitely my binders and cards that I've ripped open myself, I have the most hard time letting go of that, regardless of the value. So that's like the one caveat. I was like, yeah, it'll have owners in the future, but I love my binders. Never get sick of looking at binders, and that's my nostalgia.
Yeah, there's something about being the original owner of a card. I look back at some cards that I opened in the mid 2000s when I was collecting basketball, and I sold off a bunch of that stuff, and I still own some of the stuff that did hit harder than the others, which is good. And in some cases, I regret some of the stuff that I did sell because it had that memory, and I was the one that owned it. I was the original owner. And I can really relate to the Pokemon stories you share. I can tell that you're a Pokemon guy because you said booster box, and for those sports fans and just sports collectors out there, that means a hobby box basically in Pokemon terms. And just like you know, I loved ripping Pokemon packs, and that transferred over to basketball card packs, and now I like opening golf card packs. Just to kind of wrap up this conversation about 1900 Copes, I already have a feel that this is an important decision for you. You probably will sell it, and important for your family's finances and all of that. But wh- are there any final thoughts, and what are your emotions as you approach this sale? And is there, like, are you fully resolved in this decision?
No, I mean, no, I don't think I'll ever be fully resolved. I will say, like, this is important to like have this documented, and I'll look back on it. In either way, like I have to know and tell myself I did it for, the good of my family. I think the hesitation I'm still feeling is I still feel like it has a lot of growth, it has a lot of room to grow in terms of value. Um, so that's the only thing is like, I think that's the only fear with selling anything that's on the up, like you said, is like you, just looking back and say, was that the right decision? Yes or no? But I also don't want to look back and see that, I could have changed my family's life and I didn't. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I think that the fear of inaction is greater than the fear of action. So that's what's motivating me to do it. And I'm just going to pull the trigger. And even if the worst case scenario happens and I just get my money back or lose a little bit even, and like for some reason the auction just duds, like it is what it is. Like it's not the end of the world. And like again, already have a new project. I already started building my new set, and we can move on. So yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, definitely a little scared, but yeah, I'll be sad to see it go, but I'm really happy that it'll go to a new home. And then the last comment on that in terms of the multi-owner was like for a while I actually debated reaching out to the Golf Hall of Fame because I thought, man, like this set is bigger than my room. Like I really thought like this should be out for display. So I'm hoping that the next owner really appreciates it, and eventually the Copes world gets the love it deserves, because I still think it's super undervalued.
Absolutely. Let's look back on this episode months from now once you've sold off the set, and let's compare how you're feeling then versus now. I think that'll be a lesson for not only yourself but for the listeners. Uh, how do you feel about this kind of decision both before and after? So I'd love to have you on again, James, to talk about it.
Awesome. That sounds great. And just to let you know, I'm like 99.9% sure that it'll be auctioned off in November. So we might want to do an episode towards the end of the year and see how everything went.
Awesome. Auction November. Do you know which platform or which consignor
Yeah,
you're going to
yeah,
use?
yeah. I'm gonna use yeah, I've already did the negotiations. We're gonna do Golden Age auctions. This one's
Awesome.
had some great comps recently. Great guys over there, and gave me a great rate. So we're gonna do it. They're having their premiere auction. It's like all the listings are over 10,000. So it should be a fun one.
Wow. Well, good luck with the sale. I hope you
Thank you.
make maximum profits and that it goes to good use for your family.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
When I approached this conversation, I had just intended for an informative, discussion to carry on from the subject of last week. But what I am realizing now is that this can be a very emotional subject, letting go a big piece of your collection. And so I want to say thank you to James for opening up. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe for feeling vulnerable about this whole situation. And give you kudos as well, because not everybody knows what is going to go up in value. I know all of my friends over at the Sports Card Strategy Show would love to say there's a formula that wins every time. I'm sure there's a little bit of science to it, but if that were the case, we'd all be rich, living in beachside villas and sipping on margaritas instead of working. But it does take a special eye and a special mind to pick something out, to go out on a limb and spend that amount of money on something that you have faith in. This is the kind of play, in air quotations, that only someone who's truly enthusiastic about the cardboard would be able to pull off. And although this didn't end up being a forever piece in your collection, James, you provided an excellent home for that little batch of cardboard pieces of history, just one step in its journey through time and generations. I'm Mike. You can find me on Instagram at The Golf Card Collector. On Facebook, we've got a group with an amazing golf card community called Golf Cards and Memorabilia. I'll see you there, and I'll see you next week.
Ridiculous, golf card collector.